So I have many friends who have dared me to ask you whether the moon landing was real. I am not going to do that because you're too close. Yeah, believe me. I want to say this. I know you don't mean this because you're a nice guy, but you have quite a glare. I was, doing my little jokes and looking out, and you'd be sitting there, and it was like, big caption, like, move it along, son. Okay. Well, it's nice to see you. I interviewed you on my show, but this is the first time we've met. You're looking good. I do want to, before we get into your book and what you're going to talk about, I wanted to ask you again if you could tell the story of your nickname, of Buzz, how you got to be known as Buzz.
Well, my father was Edwin Eugene Aldrin, and he had migrated over here and was born in 1896 in Worcester, Massachusetts. He moved on through his education and had an assignment with the Air Corps to be an aide to Billy Mitchell in the Philippines, and that's where a Army chaplain happened to be there, and he had 3 children, and my father took a fancy to the oldest daughter, and they eventually got married and finished the trip from the Philippines, and were riding camels and the pyramids in the background.
Wait a minute. They got married in a trip to the Philippines?
Yeah.
Never mind.
Yeah, they got married in the Philippines,
All right.
I think.
There aren't any camels there.
No, they
I see.
came back through Egypt.
Then they went, I'm sorry, I'm getting in the way. Go on.
Now, her name was Marion Moon.
Oh.
Yeah.
Your mother's maiden name was Marion Moon.
Right. Yeah. So I grew up with the name Buzz.
Right.
That's what you're asking.
That's the
Now,
question.
when I could begin to recognize things, I had a grandmother, and it was all of us, 2 older sisters, called her Mama Moon.
Right.
Yeah. What's
not?
so odd about that? Well, my when I was maybe a couple of years old, stumbling around, crawling out of my crib, my father in the Air Corps was Eddie. My mother never liked Eddie, so she called him Gene for Eugene.
Right.
Somehow, the idea of this little kid being Junior was not thought of, evidently. So to my sister, who's a year and a half older, I was referred to as her baby brother.
Okay.
Okay? But she couldn't pronounce brother, so it came out baby Buzzer. And over the years, we got rid of the baby.
Right.
Yeah.
I'd like
but
to
I
see
was
somebody.
Buzzer for a while, and yeah.
That's it.
And then I grew up, and nobody knew me as Edwin Eugene Aldrin Jr.
Right.
till I went to the moon.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, then
they had to formalize things.
Right. So like there's a plaque on the moon, right?
Yeah.
Still there. And does it have your name on it?
Sure does.
And it says Edwin. Doesn't say Buzz.
Edwin E. Aldrin Jr.
Right. So presumably some alien might land there right now, look at it and go, I thought it was Buzz. I don't know who this guy is. Yeah. Well, let's talk about the moon because it's awesome. So I want to talk about your book, which is Mission to Mars. But is this doing things? Is this not doing things? Did you just give
You got the broken
Oh,
one,
I did.
huh?
It's you. That's you, right?
Conan O'Brien made a mistake, but I don't want to go into that.
Oh, no, please. I enjoy hearing about this.
You can see the initials on the box that's in the front.
Uh-huh.
And before this picture was taken, I was moving this way toward the lunar module.
Yeah.
You can see the landing gear. And Neil said, hey, hold it. Something like that. So I stopped and turned and faced him, and he took the picture. I didn't hear the click because sound doesn't go through a vacuum.
Right.
And then I kept walking, I guess. Now, this has turned out to be such a classic picture. Iconic, you might say. It's used over and over again. Some people think it's Neil, but he took
Well,
the picture
when you were on my show, we
because
discussed the fact that
you can see him in the visor. You can see the lunar module, and I think in the background you can see the flag.
You know, we discussed this when you were on my show, that it's one thing to be the first guy on the moon, sure. What's really important is to make sure the other guy is holding the camera.
Absolutely. Now, so you know, people have asked me, since I'm in the picture, why is that such an iconic picture?
You're on the moon. I mean, that's you on the moon. What more do you need?
Got 3 words to describe this.
Yes. On the moon. I'm sorry, no, what? What?
Location, location, location.
That's a great picture, and those footprints are still there, which I love. That they remain undisturbed. I think we have some more. Hang on, I'm pressing this button, yet nothing seems to be happening. Should I not press? Oh, I pressed the wrong button. I pressed the little laser button. That's why. Meow. Told you I was a dork. Here we go.
So we're putting up the flag.
Yeah. That's planting the flag.
And that was early. And this was taken by a camera. I mean, there wasn't another guy up there.
Yeah.
Okay. It was taken through a camera that was in my window on the right side, 1 frame a second. And when you run this movie, while we're kind of
jumping around.
So that's and for a long time, I'd have to move this forward to see the next or a later view, and then run it back to tell just who's who.
Well, who is who in that picture?
I don't know.
You don't know? You really don't know? These are some of the most examined footage in the history of humankind, and you don't know which is you?
Well, it's one of us.
That's true.
I think so. That's why later on they put a red stripe around the arm and the legs of the commander.
Tell who's who.
So you could tell who's.
That makes sense.
Who's
one of the things I've wondered about is Apollo 11. You, Neil Armstrong, Michael Collins in the command module. And that, of course, was Apollo 11. There were earlier Apollo flights, some of which went around the moon, sort of leading up to this. Who decided who got to do what? Why did you and Armstrong get to be on the lunar module on that mission, Collins on the mission? Who drew the straws?
I didn't ask you to go over this question, did I? No. Well, because it introduces, I'm going to try and be real brief about this. Yeah. But the lunar modules came off the production line. LEM 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. LEM 5 and LEM 6.
Lunar excursion module?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I've since gotten to know real well the manager of LEM 5. All right?
Right.
Which was not scheduled for a landing. It was overweight.
Oh.
Yeah. And he was disappointed because what he was managing was going to be on a mission before the first landing, which would have been LEM 6. Now, this is back in 1967, maybe the beginning of 68, and it wasn't really determined. We did a little shuffling around because LEM 3 wasn't ready, so the crew had to stay with it, and we moved the crew forward. And the one that went forward of that ended up Apollo 8 with Frank Borman as the commander, and Neil was the backup, and I was with Neil. And we originally had Jim Lovell, but then Mike Collins needed a neck operation, so he dropped out. Lovell moved in with Borman, Lovell, and Anders.
Right. And they got to go around the moon and come back without landing.
And they did. But at the time, there was set in motion exactly who would end up with which lander.
Right.
Okay? Now, my friend, who lives in San Antonio, was a program manager, Hugh Davis.
Hugh Davis. He's the guy who was working on LEM 5.
And he didn't want it. I mean, he wanted it to land. So he said to the Apollo program manager, if I take some steps to rigorously reduce the weight of this, will you make sure that it makes a landing? Okay. Up to that point, the first landing on the moon was going to be in mid-October 1969, and it was going to be LEM 6, and it would have been Apollo 12, not Apollo 11. But because the weight was reduced and it was scheduled to be a lander, Neil and I walked on the moon instead of being the flight before.
So you guys were originally scheduled for Apollo 11, which wasn't going to land.
It is the way it was working out. Now, that was before we were announced. By the time we were announced, it had met the weight requirements and was designated as a lunar lander.
Right.
First one.
Right. So you guys got to go. So now you know that you're going, you two are going in the LEM down to the moon, Michael Collins is staying up. How did you decide, or how was it decided, which of you got to step out first and become the first person in the moon? I imagine you playing
No.
rock, paper, scissors in the lander.
No.
Big, heavy gloves. No.
No coins.
No, right.
Because you can't do that in zero gravity.
That would be hilarious.
It kind of keeps going.
That'd be really funny. It's like, heads, I don't know. It's all right.
Every spacewalk up to that point had always been the junior person on the crew.
Really?
Yeah. That's so the commander could stay in the spacecraft while the other guy went out and did some experiments. And so he could oversee what was going on. If anything needed some decision, he could, well, a couple times it did need a decision to cancel the spacewalk because the crewman was getting overheated.
Right.
That's an interesting detail.
Right.
Because I eventually became the guy to train in the Gemini program for the last spacewalk.
Right.
And they were getting a little nervous. Somebody suggested, well, why don't you train underwater in a swimming pool with the spacesuit on?
Right.
And then you'll be neutrally buoyant. Like, well, being a scuba diver from 10 years before almost, I could see the great merit in doing this.
Right.
So I became the first guy to train underwater for a successful spacewalk at the end.
So you did your spacewalk.
But Lovell, the commander of that mission, was inside.
Right.
And I was there. And this is the way it went. Now, this is a couple details, and they're interesting, I think. The president had said, I believe this nation should commit itself before the decade is out of landing a man on the moon.
Right.
And bringing him back safely.
Right. That's the trick, isn't it?
He said, a man.
Right.
Okay, well, we decided to send 2 men.
Right.
He didn't say anything about going out and kicking up dust and walking around. So we could have landed, taken pictures out the window, come back, and it had been a great success. But it was decided, well, as long as we landed, we could have put one person out, kicked up some dust, come back in again. And because of the precedent that had been set all along, if we had done that, the commander would have stayed inside, and I might have been the junior guy to do that. But they decided, well, now we're going to send 2 people out, kind of buddy-buddy system.
Right. What if one of you gets lost?
Yeah, you got to bring him back in.
Right.
Like, do you see the movie Gravity? Well,
I haven't seen it, but yeah.
It's great. She ought to get an Oscar.
You liked the movie Gravity?
I did.
That's authoritative, if you ask me. If you liked it, it's good. Done. Period.
Yeah.
All right, but move on.
Okay,
So they're going to send 2
So there
guys.
were a lot of people in the training division who kind of thought that this, in following precedent previously set, that the guy going out first shouldn't be the commander, but it should be the person in charge of the experiments.
Right.
Now, the commander was in charge of all the maneuvers, including the very crucial landing, which is far more important than anything else.
Yeah.
And the liftoff and everything coming back. So it's logical that the workload of training should be kind of turned over to the junior guy.
Yeah, and just to clarify, on this mission, he was the commander.
He
Neil
was
was
in
the
the
commander.
second group of astronauts. I applied for that, but I was turned down because I wasn't trained as a test pilot.
Right. So
So I applied, and I was in the third group.
So you were junior to him. So he was the commander.
Absolutely,
Okay.
yeah. And they made a big thing about seniority in NASA.
Right.
So there were a number of people who sort of thought, well, in keeping with what we'd done before, maybe the lunar module pilot instead of the commander should go out. And then there were other people who said, no. So it was back and forth. Some of the flight plans were written up one way and then the other. And I could see that it was interfering with going ahead. We had to make a decision. Of course, I felt it was incumbent upon me to represent the point of view of the lunar module pilot who would probably like to go out first. And whatever we did on our mission was going to be done for later missions. But people weren't making the decision. So I went into Neil's office and I said, Neil, look, we got to make a decision between who's going to get out first. He said something like, well, I understand the historical significance of this, and I'm not going to rule myself out of anything. I didn't salute, but I could see what he meant, and so I left the office. Now, I felt it was sufficiently important. I went to the head of the Apollo program, and I said, George, we need a decision on this. It's interrupting our training. We need to decide who's going to go out first. And then we can move ahead. And if there's a decision, make sure that it doesn't get reversed or anything like that, because that would really mess it up.
Right. Decide, be done, move on.
Well, there was a little exercise that was done about the way the hatch opened.
Right.
And if I was going to go out first, I'd have to be over here when we depress the cabin and go out first.
Right.
Now, the hatch opened this way. The hinge was on this side.
Right.
So the person who was here would then move over here, open the hatch, and go on out. Now, if somewhere in there was a difficulty and you had to cancel what you were doing, the guy who was on the way out would get back in, move over here, open the door, and the guy. Now we're in pressure suits.
Right.
So we pressurize the cabin. Suppose the cabin wouldn't pressurize, we would have to stay in a pressurized suit. Right. And you could not move beyond each person. So you got the commander in the wrong place.
All right, okay? I'm kind of following, but basically logistical
problem.
problem.
I'd have been here, and he'd have been here.
It would have been messed up.
The commander's on the left. Now, this is two failures in a very short period of time, to come back in and then not be able to.
The first failure is you have to abort, get back in. The second failure is the cabin will pressurize.
So whoever put the hinge on the door really kind of, in the view of several people.
Really?
Yeah. The hatch had a hinge here, and because of these two failures, it mandated that the commander on the left go out first. And
so if the hinge were on the other side of the door, I'm going to ask you this.
But that's a technicality that was kind of used to justify.
Yeah.
Now, there's been a lot of years since then.
Yeah.
And absolutely, the right decision was made. The commander should do the symbolic event.
Yeah.
And go down in history that way.
Did you have a?
And not the guy who put the hinge.
Right. We should remember Armstrong. We shouldn't remember the guy with the hinges. Did you? Because we all know that Armstrong practiced and he had his thing that he was going to say. One small step for a man. Although some say he didn't say a man. Did you have something that you had thought of that you would say, if you were the first?
Oh.
You didn't think?
No, because
I'm not an astronaut, and I've
No,
got 10.
I kind of felt that
What?
here is the news media wanting to know what he's going to say.
Right.
And it's interfering in our training. It interfered a lot as to who's going to get out first. And then, okay, Neil, what's he going to say? And nobody went to him then. But in the flight out, Mike Collins is kind of a jokester.
Yeah.
And he asked Neil the question in jest, hey, Neil, have you decided what you're going to say when you get down there and go out? And Neil said something like, when I get down there and if we land okay and if things look up, then I'll think about it.
You're kidding me.
I'm not kidding you. You can ask Mike Collins. Now, I did not really think that was the case. I thought Neil was just
He was giving you a line.
jesting with
Yes,
us.
yes.
He tends to do that. I certainly felt after it was successfully over that there was an individual who had recommended that Apollo 8 on Christmas, orbiting the moon for the first time, that they read from Genesis, read from the Bible.
Right.
And I thought that would have been the logical person, since we were on the backup crew, that maybe Neil would have asked his advice.
Right.
It's a little bit more involved, because the guy who was with us in the Around the World trip really didn't tell him, but he knew somebody else that he asked the question, and that person said, gee, I think if they're up there Christmas Eve and they're the first flight to orbit around the moon, that's pretty significant. They should read from the Bible, Genesis. Very wise decision.
Yeah.
So I thought, now if Neil happened to ask someone, he might ask the same guy.
Right.
That's what I would have done.
Right.
But I didn't.
Right.
I would have, not trying to compose such a historic thing myself.
Yeah.
I'd have asked, the president, he doesn't write all of his speeches. He's got a speech.
You would have asked someone to help you out.
And a leader of a corporation.
Right.
Yeah. And then I would have, put my spin on it.
No, probably.
But,
I would have said, holy crap, I'm on the moon. It's a good thing I didn't go. Here's
I hope
the problem.
we get out of here.
Yeah, here's the problem. I could talk to you all day, as is obvious, but we're out of time, and we haven't even gotten to the subject of your book, which is what we should do.
Don't send NASA astronauts back to the moon.
Right.
Okay.
Here you are giving this advice to the President of the United States. So let me ask you this, because you said this to me when we interviewed for my radio show. It was like, why go back to the moon? We've been there. So let me just ask you, this will be the last question, and then if I'm not mistaken, Buzz will be out with his book, and you can meet him there. Why shouldn't we go to the moon, and why should we go to Mars?
If we were to go to the moon,
Yeah.
the Chinese would be there first.
Right.
And they would welcome us. Okay. That's the way it certainly looks right now.
Right.
By a very eminent person who did a study in '09, and I submitted my plan to him. He said we couldn't get to the moon the way we're going right now until 2030, and we wouldn't even have a lander. Okay.
Right.
That was his judgment.
We'd have to jump from orbit.
No, he was just kind of saying the
not
budgetary
gonna happen.
realities were
Right.
such. Now, the Chinese at one time looked like they were going to try and make it in 2020.
Right.
But they've got a space station
Right.
To build now. But if we were to build a big rocket and a big lander and get to the moon and then start supporting that, guess what the Russians would be doing?
What would they be doing? They'd be going to Mars.
The word is M-A-R-S.
Yeah.
It's red.
Right.
Russia is red.
Right.
Yeah. Now, they
Do you think
may
that's the
say
appeal? Is
we're
that their
gonna-
level
they
of
may
thinking?
say they're going to build a permanent base on the moon.
Right.
I don't always believe what they say.
Right.
Okay.
Right. But
I'm a Cold War warrior.
I understand. But in the few minutes we have left, I just want you to, because you have more credibility on this point than anybody alive. We have limited resources. we don't have enough money. We can't pay for the stuff we've got. Why should we spend the billions, the countless billions it will take to put a man on Mars? Go.
Well, because the greatness that we exhibited in the 60s and 70s brought so much to this country in the way of innovation, the way of inspiration of our education system. Right now, people talk about STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. We were at the top. We're not there now.
Right.
So it is crucial for us to be able to maintain that kind of greatness. We are an exceptional country. I believe that.
Right.
But we can't do it on 0.5% of the budget. I don't care what you want to cut. If you cut any more, we have no space program. We can't even get to our own space station, $100 billion space station. We can't get our astronauts there. We got to buy a ticket on the Russians, finance there. That's the sorry state because of a number of not so good decisions, but also because we were getting 3.5% to 4% to finance Apollo. Now, how in the world can we go anywhere and exhibit the greatness that this country has without increasing the budget above what it is? Many individuals have said that.
Yeah.
And people haven't paid any attention. You know, politicians want something right now.
Yeah.
Right.
Let me ask you this, and this will be the last thing. Let's assume, I know it'll take a long time. Right now you've got 2040 as your goal and your plan. Let's say it comes sooner. Let's say you're still in good health, and they said, Buzz, would you like to go? Would you go?
No.
No? No?
No.
Why not?
When I was at West Point, I was not a cross-country guy. I was not a miler,
Yeah.
a half-miler. I was a pole vaulter on one
Yeah.
altitude.
Right.
And every so often, it's your time. And then you got
vault.
about 1 minute or less,
Yeah.
30 seconds, where you start running down and you do that, and then you sit down, you rest for a while.
Yeah.
I'm not a long distance guy.
Right.
Swimming, whatever it is, and just would not get
Halfway to
along
Mars,
with
you'd be
people
like,
for that long a
Really?
time.
You couldn't get along with them?
Well, right now you got to look at my age
Yeah.
and when we can get there.
Yeah.
I hope to be around at our 50th anniversary of the landing on the moon.
Yeah.
Okay. That'll occur during the presidency that succeeds the president. And a matter of fact, that president will be running for re-election in 2020, and the 50th anniversary is 2019, July.
Right.
Okay? I'm kind of hoping that whoever is elected understands that.
Right.
And on that big occasion, doesn't just gloss over it, but takes advantage, because he might not get reelected.
Right.
He or she.
Right. And so you're hoping that on that anniversary, we announce the next thing. Ladies and gentlemen, Buzz Aldrin. You can say hello to him afterwards.